All right. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Beautiful Saturday morning. My name is Lance English, the coaching cavalier here and happy to help out. And today we are talking about anchoring yourself for change because change is one of the most dreadfully awesome things that you're ever going to encounter. And because of that, it's important to learn to expect it, learn to address it, and learn how to basically move your way forward through it. So just to kind of start out, I normally like to ask people, how do you really feel about change? And as someone who has sat through an endless string of Toastmasters meetings, sales presentations, go get them, let's gung ho our way through life kind of presentations, everyone's going to say, yeah, I love change. Change is awesome. Yeah, I want to change. I want a better life. I want a bigger house, a wider car. Yeah. And everyone is very gung-ho for it until they actually have to. Everyone is gung-ho for change until change happens to them. Because when drastic change is required, more often than not, it turns up in ways that are unexpected and oftentimes unappealing. We're thinking, everyone's very eager for, well, yeah, I would like to, I'd like to change my job. Excellent. That's something that you can plan for. It's something that comes along just fine. You can do all your metrics and it's a comfortable place. However, more often than not, the changes that we find ourselves confronting are going to be much more unexpected and drastic. And they turn things into a complete and total freak show, and everyone goes into crisis mode and freak out mode. And it can be anything from a small thing like changing your desk at the office to much larger things. Not to necessarily get into it, but relationship changes, those sort of things happen. One of my personal favorite examples of a change that I personally have had to undergo, there was a time right about 10 years ago now, where my wife and I and our two kids were living in a rented 4-bedroom house in a nice location in the city, and the owner lived next door. Well, we were given less than 2 months notice that we had to find another place to live. This is already challenging under the best of circumstances. When you consider that both of our kids were just finishing up high school and middle school, respectively, within 3 months, that meant we had to find a place that was still within the boundaries of both of those schools, narrowing our scope tremendously. When you consider the fact that we had 4 pets, we had to find a place that accommodated both those schools and 4 pets and allow us time to move. I can safely say it was stressful. I lost it a lot, and it was unpleasant, but it was change. It was something that we had to learn to live with. Which is good for what it is. It can also be something as simple as, your car breaks down when you've got important things going. These are all the little stressors. So we can pretty well, hopefully largely agree that most people are really keen with change until change necessarily comes. So in my experience, I have found that among the greatest obstacles that come along with these things, it involves a lot of fear of the uncertain. It includes a lot of doubt of your abilities to handle these changes. And worse, it comes with a tremendous amount of concern about urgency. Change puts us into survival mode, and survival mode is fight or flight or cower, which a lot of us do pretty well. If you're listening to this, there are some questions I would certainly like to put out to give you some consideration. Actually, I have someone on hand. So generally, if I may, what has been one of the most difficult changes that you've had to undergo, and what was the end result? Did it end up well? Did it end up poorly? And what are things that you could have made a difference on in the process?
Yeah. Well, let's see. So a couple of different examples came to mind.
Okay.
And here we, I just wanna, there we go. So I mean, everything from like my parents divorcing when I was a kid was a big change. And I think, and I think we're talking kind of more to maybe when you're not at that age, but a different
Mhm.
stage too. And so one of the biggest changes for me was when I deconstructed my religious beliefs really rather quickly. So my whole worldview changed. I mean, it wasn't night and day or anything. Like it didn't take 24 hours. It was it was a process that had been beginning to sort of change the way I saw the world, and then it was the kind of snowball effect where it kind of bottomed down at one point rather quickly, in from my perspective.
Okay.
And so, like, and what came of that, like, is my whole life changed. Like I had a whole different direction, and I had been going to school for almost a decade, probably studying theology and in different with different levels of degrees, like first the bachelor's then the master's. And it was like, well, now what do I do? Like this isn't where I'm going anymore. So I will say, like, what could have been like even more, I think, supportive at the time is that if I hadn't tried to maybe go like do the whole process by myself, and I think that was a tendency that I had for a long time, and maybe still do some in some ways, that I try to do it on my own and just try to like, oh, I can figure this out, or like, or who else would understand, and that's what I love about like what you're doing with coaching. What coaching is that it's this opportunity to not try to do it alone. you know yeah.
That's actually great. That's pretty spot on. I'm curious. So when you were working through the big change from theology and away from theology, how did you have indicators coming along the lines that it was going to be heading that way? Was it something that you could have predicted, or did it just kind of
Mm.
slowly convert itself?
um I don't think at the time I would have ever thought that I would have ultimately questioned everything. I knew I was liberating myself in different ways from different pieces of it, but I guess I was not aware that it was going to completely change,
Okay.
and so that I don't know if I would have had a way to sort of preempt that or something, or like cushion that in a way. um, but yeah.
No, that's actually an awesome. It's a very awesome insight. One of the big reasons why change can be particularly earth shaking is it's really easy to continue being caught up in kind of the day to day, and you don't necessarily see these incremental differences from day to day and week to week. And in a lot of cases, larger changes can be predictable. For example, if you're starting to see incremental changes at a job, for example, different management styles, different micromanaging, things along those lines, it might start giving you an indicator that it's time to go, but it may never necessarily be that full, I got to go now. It's just one of those nice things. I like to consider myself an observational sort of person, and even I get shocked by a lot of things that I really should have paid attention to. So before I really cover anything, I do absolutely want to acknowledge the fact that a lot of the changes that we talk about, particularly in the world that we're dealing with right now, with so many people stepping away from their jobs, with so many people adjusting to dramatic life shifts, with so many people still honestly just kind of getting themselves back out there, is to acknowledge that even in the best of circumstances, change can be really, really, really hard. Period. I won't sugarcoat it. It can be it can be traumatic in some cases, and it can oftentimes be really horrible. And there's nothing wrong with having a difficult time with change. There's nothing wrong with struggling. There's nothing wrong with finding yourselves so battered by change that you lay in bed for 3 days, binging old sci-fi series and curling up with a cup of tea every now and again. Not that I would have any personal experience with this whatsoever. But one of the most important things to keep in mind is, strangely, that's something I picked up from an old parable that once I learned it myself, I actually passed on to my kids. And when I have a bad time, my kids parrot it right back to me. This too shall pass. Say it with me. This too shall pass. Okay. So no matter how difficult things are, no matter how challenging, no matter how desperate, no matter how dire, time's going to pass one way or the other. Change will happen whether you are an active participant or not. The calendar, the days on the calendar will keep going by, the time will keep ticking. Yes, honestly, you can ride out change if that's what you have to do. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. However, we do certainly much prefer that even if you don't necessarily take an active role, you take an observant role, so that you can learn the lesson for the next time. But more than anything, it is so important to understand that it's difficult. You are more than fine if it's difficult. Everyone will forgive you if it's difficult. Everyone goes through changes. No one is going to hold you to a brutal standard if they actually honestly understand what you're dealing with. And I know, for me personally, I tend to do that lone wolf kind of thing when things are tough, and especially if you've come from the kind of upbringing that didn't necessarily encourage talking about your challenges, or we don't talk about that. We keep that in the family. We don't air our laundry. It can be remarkably isolating. And more than anything, before I go any further with any of this, I want to reinforce that you are not isolated, and you are okay if you are having challenges. Fact of the matter is, change is inevitable, period. Change is happening every day to every one of us in one way, shape, or form. We're constantly integrating new information. We're granting new experiences. If you are a particular extraordinary and bold person, you might, new foods every day. Guess what? That's new experience. Take a different route to work. It's new experience. It's change. It's data. You're gaining. It's all part of growth. And as anyone who's been a teenager can usually attest, growth is awkward. And growth will always be awkward. So one of the first things to kind of keep in mind is, as you're going through life, stepping away from your pride a little bit and being receptive to the fact that change is happening makes a world of difference. The more that you can accept the fact that you don't know everything and you're not supposed to know everything, the easier it will be to actually, again, take in the information, observe, and integrate more fluidly. People really talk a lot about how important it is to fail often, fail early, fail up, because the whole concept of growing through failure. I personally prefer a little bit of a reframe on that. I advocate much more thoroughly that people actively seek out change, actively look for opportunities to learn new things, to try new experiences, to grow new stuff. And the biggest reason for that is the more you accustom yourself to change, the more you accustom yourself to taking in information, the easier it is and the greater that you become and the more incrementally powerful your individual change and growth will be. You know, the effort to put yourself out there to take on a class, or like Jen Lee had talked to me earlier, went kayaking the other day, learned it was a lot easier than was expected. And, you know, that's going to increase the inclination to do that more often, which is great. So I did mention that there were several aspects that will normally set things back. One of the biggest ones that I constantly had struggled with is urgency. As mentioned, change can be a little bit of an upset of the tea tray, you know, and when these things happen, the initial response is action, must do something. You don't have to. You absolutely don't have to. More often than not, you are not going to be required to make any important decisions within the first 10 to 15 minutes of any changes. Mind you, if there's an injury, certainly act faster, but under most circumstances, you will hear about changes. You'll have hours, you'll have days, you'll have weeks. There's no hurry. Change is going to move at the pace that it's going to move. More often than not, you have the opportunity, and your brain and your heart are going to want to rush you forward. Everything in you is, again, it's that primal lizard brain that says fight or flight. Change is uncomfortable. I want to change this area of discomfort. And if that means forcing my way through it until I get to the other side, that's great. If that means running away from it, that's great. Except that's exactly the worst possible thing to do. You really have to fight the urge to act and to force and to run with a passion, and learn to accept that the very first lesson is that change is going to happen. Change is a process. It's I've heard that change comes in two forms, either at a volcanic pace or a glacier pace. It's either right now or over time. So taking the time to acknowledge that you have the time to work with these changes, take the time that you're not required to take an immediate action, take the time to literally process a little bit. So I'm sure you've heard of Murphy's Law. I am a huge fan of Murphy's Law, and the basics of Murphy's Law is anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Or if you prefer the more pleasant reframe, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. You know, expect that good things will happen, but make a plan just in case it won't. Now, one of the great things about these sort of laws is there's oftentimes corollaries or commentaries. One of my absolute favorite commentaries on Murphy's Law is called Hill's Commentary, and it reads as following. Number one, if we lose much by having things go wrong, take all possible care. Caution. Number two, if we have nothing to lose by change, relax. You have nothing to lose. Relax. Number three, if we have everything to gain by change, relax. Chill, you've got everything to gain. And one of the more difficult ones is number four, if it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. The ability to step back from a situation and to assess it according to those specific guidelines, all of which are really ultimately positive and all of which ultimately say, you know, be patient with yourself, be patient with others, see what's gonna, you know, be cautious, but relax. and really actively see how much this change will impact you, how much of an actual risk it will provide, or if it's even a change that you need to acknowledge. You know, if my wife is going through a job change, certainly I should be aware, I should pay attention. I personally don't have anything to lose with it, so I can relax. I can certainly gain a lot from it. I can relax. But ultimately, for me personally, it doesn't matter anywhere near as much as it matters to her. So if she decides, oh, I'm looking at a job change, okay, groovy. I got your back. I support you. Do what you have to do. Take your time. Again, these are skills. They all sound really, really easy, but they're not. They take practice. You have to continually observe and assess and observe and assess and observe and assess. And again, this is why I recommend actively seek out change, actively seek out opportunities to learn and grow, because the more you do them, the more you really do find yourself grounded and easier to handle pretty much everything comes up. You know, there's an old story. If you know what, I completely lost it, but that's okay. But again, change is going to move at the pace it's going to move. You are effectively a passenger on the chain, on the change. It's your choice, you know, as to how to address it. So when you do actually go through change, one of the important steps to do is, well, number one, don't let urgency trick you. Urgency is a trap. I honestly can't tell you that enough. I spent months dwelling in urgency. And when I stopped on that, all of a sudden I found great growth. When you do find the change coming, now is the time to assess. Look at the change and really run it through the list of questions. You know, is this a major change? Is it a minor change? Is it going to affect me a lot? Is it going to affect me a little? Is it going to affect me at all? How much is it going to affect the people around me? What have, you know, is this something that's remotely related to something that I've experienced before? You know, for example, a job change. Most people have changed jobs a time or two. The first time you do it, the first time you go from that first job and take a leap into the wilderness, it's terrifying. By the time you do the fifth one, I got to fill out paperwork again. What? I gotta give them my resume and fill out all the information on the thing. And at that point, it just becomes old hat. You know, what do you bring with you? What is your skill set? What's the time frame for the change? Do I have to make a decision today, or do I have a month before it happens, or do I have half a year before I really need to worry? You know, what paths are open to you? You know, is there only one end result and I just need to find out how to navigate it? Are there several possible end results, and then measure out what option is going to be best? What options can be eliminated? You know, what things, you know, what changes can I immediately put out? And it's really powerful, because we all have a very strong tendency when we make a notable shift in life. Again, homes, jobs, relationships, any of these things. Our brain always tells us it's a brand new thing. And our brain always says, I don't know what this is. It makes me uncomfortable. Therefore, I'm going to be remarkably restrictive in the emotional energy that I can dedicate to it. I'm going to be restrictive in the intelligence that I apply. Ooh, yes. There's a question. Yes, ma'am.
Well, it wasn't not so much a question, but a reflection that I really wanted to share was that I love these different questions you're giving, because it demystifies change. You know, because like as you're saying, like I'm connecting with even my own experience of how when change comes, or like, you know, when you got that notice that you had to move, it's just kind of, so like either you can, as you get more aware of how change is happening, you can maybe become aware of those incremental things. And I appreciate you saying like there probably are indicators for a lot of different times when change is going to happen, but we're not really thinking about how change is a constant, you know. So we're just kind of assuming like, oh, I can relax into certainty, but that's not really a thing, you know? And so what I love about this is like you're saying, you know, a couple of different really powerful things of like, hey, like as we're really accepting and like celebrating, you know, and moving into the adventure of change by trying to choose it actively, right?
Yeah.
Then we'll be able to see these indicators. But then also if you didn't, it doesn't really matter because now you have all these questions. And I really love that slowing down out of that sort of panic state that you're talking about.
It's so it's kind of funny, and it's a great thing that kind of applies from a purely Seattle perspective. Anyone who watches this who's not in Pacific who's not in the Pacific Northwest region, Washington State has one of the largest, most active ferry systems in the world. We have a whole bunch of traffic, you know, side to side over Puget Sound and everything. When you are actually on the ferry and it's moving, you can hardly tell you're going anywhere. And you know, unless the weather is horrible, it's a remarkably smooth ride, and you're progressing all the while that you're not necessarily aware that you're progressing unless you take the time to stop and look around. The thing is, and here's one of those kind of ways to look at it. When you get on the ferry at first, you're not going anywhere. I mean, you can feel the engines thrumming because the engines are going to thrum. But as soon as and most of the time, it's even going to start moving, and you're not going to notice it because they run remarkably smooth. But if it comes to a dead stop, you're going to feel that impact, and it's going to trigger that urgency. You know, what happened? What happened? But if you're conscious of the fact that you're already moving, you're going to expect to stop. You know, you're going to expect it to slow down at some point. You're going to expect it to come into the dock. But if you're not paying attention, you know, all these jarring things will just bounce you from one, you know, they'll pinball you from panic attack to panic attack. And it's challenging. Which again is one of the big reasons that I love observation. Observation is so important because the more you just kind of integrate little bits of information through every day, you're not just looking at your change, you're looking at the change in other people. You know, if you're in a relationship for 5 years, is it the same relationship you started with? No. You know, if you're in a job for 3 years, is it the same job you started? No, it's not how it works. and being aware. So, you know, fighting off the urgency, being aware and looking at what the actual change is. And again, the best part is that even though our brain tells us that every new change is a new change, there's no such thing. You never start from a blank slate. You don't wake up every morning and learn to walk again. It's like a video game. You know, if you're playing a video game and you're playing it for the second or third playthrough, you're going to come in with new knowledge that you can apply. You know, you're going to come in with new skills that you had picked up. No matter where you advance from, you're advancing with all of your previous experience and all of your previous skills that you got all the way there. And every one of them builds a stronger foundation for the next change. It's kind of funny. It's almost like building a pyramid upside down. You start from a point and everything just gets bigger, and the knowledge base, which should be your foundation, is at the top of this pyramid because it is now such a broad base of information that you can pull from. And if you can manage a certain measure of introspectiveness, this is another one of those good reasons why people recommend journaling. You can go back to your journals. You can see how far you've come. You know, you can look at your high school yearbook. Wow, what the hell was I thinking? And boom, here you are. So we've covered urgency. We've covered assessing the change in and of itself. Now here's where it gets a little bit more interesting, because once you know what the problem is, now it's time to break out your toolbox. And now's the time to look at what the options are. You know, what skills can you apply to the change? What what tools do you have that you have learned from other circumstances and other changes that you can help to make this change smoother? Early travelers basically drug sleds until someone made a wheel, and wheels themselves improved. It's, again, incremental change, incremental change, incremental change. What previous experience have you had that may be relational to it? Here's one of the toughest ones that I can say. And to me, it remains one of the most difficult things when it comes to reviewing your assets. Who do I have who supports me? Do I have any mentors who have gone through this experience? Do I have anyone whose life experience I can fall back on? If you are an overthinker, again, no idea what that feels like at all. If you are someone who falls into the urgency trap, if you are one who if you're imaginative, creative people are some of the best people on earth because they can come up with the most terrifying scenarios for the simplest problems. And it's wonderful. But the question is, who do you reach out to when you're going through a change that honestly is a little outside of your ability, especially considering that most people are remarkably uncomfortable being vulnerable enough to say, I've got a change happening. It's more than I can handle. Please help me. I don't know if it's necessarily a cultural thing. I don't know if it's a societal thing. I don't know if it's a personal mental health thing. More people struggle through change because they refuse to acknowledge that it's something they may need help with. It's something that people can genuinely support them through. And it's just tough. It's just tough. But that's one of the biggest questions that you have to ask. But again, it still comes, and then that even pulls back to the, okay, well, I've assessed the problem. I've assessed my assets. I can plan now. But you have to keep all of that in the loop. It's all insanely simple. It really is insanely simple, but we always want to complicate it so much when more often than not, it's just a question of, be patient, take a look at it. Let's make some changes, get some other folks to help out. And, when you are planning, look at multiple possible outcomes. And not just outcomes that are projected, but outcomes that you actually would prefer to see happen. If I'm looking at a job change, we keep coming back to job change because there's so many people who are changing jobs right now. If I'm looking at a job change, okay, here's the thing. I can stay at my own job. I can go into another job in the same field for another company that may pay better. I can move into a different, I can go from the sales department to the training department, or even shipping, should I feel smart. Or maybe I just don't like this job at all. Maybe I just want to strike into something new. The options are all there. You just have to decide how you want to plan for it. And this is actually one of the things with regards to reviewing the assets, especially when it comes to something like a job change. Can I afford it? What kind of a financial impact is this going to have on me? I walked away from a job about 5 years ago, and the way that the conversation was presented, had a very bad morning at work. I texted my wife and said, okay, honey, if I walk away from my job, will we die? And the consensus was, from my very well thought out wife, we will probably survive about 6 months or so. Awesome. I've got 6 months before I die if I walk away from this job that is killing me. And again, this falls under your assets. Different people will have different assets. Some people are blessed enough to be born into fortune. Other people have had to work their way up and scrape every cent. It doesn't change the fact that we are all going to experience change. We're all going to have to assess. We're all going to have to plan. The only thing to really keep in mind with planning is, I'd mentioned it before, Murphy's Law. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. If you're planning, make sure to have plan Bs, make sure to have plan C, have a plan B for each additional step. Okay, well, I'm gonna do my resume. What if I need to change my resume? Okay, well, I got a second one for this type of job. Okay, well, what if I can't get the money I need? Well, I can do this for less money. What if, what if? I mean, don't lose yourself down the what if rabbit hole, because you'll never come out. But, look at the most logical outcomes, plot your way, navigate to the best possible outcome, and really go from there. So it's a really tough one on this one. And I just want to put this out. I emphasized it earlier, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to get trapped in these things. It's perfectly fine. A difficult thing to have in times of change is faith. It is important to have faith in yourself. It is important. And if you can't have faith in yourself, have faith in the fact that the universe wants progress. The universe, however you see it, religiously, scientifically, whichever, and not getting into the second law of thermodynamics, but ultimately, the universe seeks equilibrium. The universe loves a balance. The universe loves things to work in an ordered fashion. Everything that you have faced before today, you have survived. Again, say it with me. Everything that you have faced before, you have survived. It's not to say you haven't been beaten or traumatized. It's not to say that you have all your fingers. I know a few folks that it's not necessarily the case. It's not that, it's not that you haven't faced massive financial outcomes. Honestly, it's not. In a lot of cases, people have found themselves homeless for extended periods of time. People have found themselves trapped in mental health spirals or substance spirals. And that's horrible. I wish we lived in a world where no one had to deal with that sort of thing, but unfortunately, it is an aspect of life. But the thing to take away from that, more than anything, the thing to take away from that is you're alive. Every horrible, horrendous thing that has happened to you has not killed you. And because you're alive, you have the potential to keep going. Can it get worse? Certainly, it can always get worse. Can it get better? Absolutely, it can get better. But as long as you draw a breath, you have options. And I really want people to realize that there is no, until the end, there's no end. As long as you're there, there's things you can do. Are they going to work? Not necessarily. I can't tell you, but you're never going to know till you try. So I actually want to share kind of a hilarious anecdote. So my dad is a shipping clerk by trade, at least when I was growing up. And they're kind of a rough and tumble crowd. I was going through a particularly rough time as a teenager, and he took me aside and said, son, I want you to know, people can be pretty unpleasant. The world can be a difficult place. They can take your house and everything you own. They can take all your money and exile you to the far corners of the earth. They can beat you into the ground and give you a few swift kicks just along the way. But you know what? They still can't eat you. Which is the absolute most bizarre parental wisdom that you will ever receive. But I have to say, it was remarkably encouraging, and it is something I've held close to my heart ever since. Advancing on. So we've we've covered relaxing, we've covered assessing, we've covered reviewing your assets. Let's start looking at actions to take. So this is going to sound remarkably
Can I
counter.
say one thing?
Yes.
Or this might be a part of the actions section too, but I really appreciate you bringing up like thinking about your support system and who you have around you, and acknowledging that quite often for a lot of people that we think there isn't anybody, or like when we're in that panic of the change happening, maybe we feel embarrassed about the change, or we have some sort of like thing going on in our head about it, and so we think that we can't talk to anybody, but it's almost never true, you know, like not like even, and I've been a pretty like secluded person some points in my life, it was still not literally true that there was not like one person, you know. So even during that time when I was the change I had mentioned, one of the like really supportive things that happened is I went to like the person who kind of like helps you figure out your classes, you know, your courses, your time in the university. And I was telling her what was happening, and she was like, and she was like, she's one of the university professors or the seminary professors. She's like, nobody really knows if God exists. I was just, I was like, oh, thank you. It was very just normalizing, you know.
It is.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's not like I went from all God to
Nope.
belief in just nothing at all, you know. But it was a sense of like I was finally okay to have my process of like being able to discover what was true for me. And because of that person who was there, even if I was telling myself there was nobody available, there actually really was.
Yeah, it's kind of an insidious thing where we are very culturally programmed to not acknowledge weakness, to not acknowledge personal weakness. I know a lot of people file that whole thing under toxic masculinity, but the fact of the matter is none of us are, you know, and especially Americans. America is a rugged individualist culture. You know, we are powerful explorers and entrepreneurs, and so it's not even just a question of not thinking that anyone's out there, but it's a question of if I admit that I am weak, other people are going to be disappointed with me, and I would rather struggle than feel like someone is disappointed in me. And it's one of the worst things that you'll have to deal with. And one of my over the years I've taken to being very open about some of the mental health challenges that I work with, that I deal with. And you know, I let people know I have good days, I have bad days, I have horrible days, and I have epically awesome days. And the ability to normalize, that sort of thing is huge. That's actually one of the big reasons why change in particular is something that I have such a passion for, is because change is normal, period. It happens. It always happens. And it's always happening. It's always happening around you. You know, while we're sitting here having this conversation, I can guarantee the birds are off in the trees doing whatever their stuff is, changing trees, because, you know, trees aren't necessarily as good. Everything around you is in a perpetual state of change, but we're all terrified of it because we don't want anyone to see that for whatever reason we can't handle it. And that actually does kind of come in a little bit to the next part with regards to actions. Because it sounds remarkably counterintuitive, but not all change requires you to act. Is as often as not, change will just do whatever. The world we live in is an intricate machine that runs on so many of its own cycles and so many of its own processes. And as much as we want to just kind of reach up to the clock there and kind of adjust the hands one way or the other to make it go faster or slower, more often than not, that just kind of gets in the way. You know, your ego says, I must control this. But your ego your ego doesn't matter to the rest of the process going on. You know, I could jump off a building and I'll say, you know what? I really don't think I would like to hit the ground. So I'm not going to. Yes, that is exactly how ludicrous it is to try and hold back change. You know, that is how ludicrous it is to try and especially control things that are so much bigger than you. It's hilarious because that's one of the biggest things. It's again, it comes down to that faith in yourself and faith in the universe. The universe wants balance. The universe will bring you along with it as long as you're okay. So this gonna sound a little hippy dippy, just because. Sometimes the most important thing to do is just sit still and, for lack of a better term, listen for the music. The right thing to do if you're sitting there, pausing, not thinking about it, not overthinking about it, the right thing's often going to honestly sing to you. If you're on the right course of action, you'll feel that cohesion of it. You'll feel that this just feels right, you know, and your gut and your gut and your brain align. This is the right thing to be doing. This is where I'm supposed to be. And you'll even occasionally get those strange serendipity coincidences and such, which will pop up and say, hey, this is where I'm supposed to be. And that, more often than not, the best action to take is no action at all. You know, like I'd mentioned earlier in Hill's commentaries, if you have everything to lose, relax. If you have everything to gain, relax. If it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. Just relax. Now, it is important to keep in mind that if you do feel compelled to act, called upon to act, absolutely act. You know, because a lot of times that's going to be the case. There's a classic maritime trope where in times of a storm, you know, everything is going great. The expectation, the plan is to hold fast. You know, grab hold of the rope, don't let go. Hold on, hold on, hold on. Hold fast is the absolute best first course of action with any change that comes. Simply put, because you're in the tempest, you're not going to control the tempest. You know, ride it for a little bit and see where it's going. Again, this also throws back to the whole "this too shall pass." If it's a brief squall, and you sit tight and you don't make any drastic steps, you'll do just fine. But you know, say a small conflict arises somewhere, and you feel a need to insert yourself into it. You could turn a little tiny storm into a total tempest, all because for whatever reason you felt it necessary to stick your nose in it. I've done this more times than I would care to remember. But there are some times when you just have to let go of the rope, and you have to make a plan on the fly, and you have to stick to it. So if you do feel yourself compelled to act, if the world is singing to you, now's the time to act. Commit wholeheartedly. Whatever you do, throw everything into the change that you need to make, because the sooner you get through it, the better off you'll be, the more you'll gain the growth, even if it's a miserable change, even if it's a horrible change you don't want to deal with. Disease, excellent example. You know, if someone gets cancer, for example, they're not going to just sit back and let cancer fix itself. It's not going to do it. You have to plan, and you have to commit wholeheartedly. And with that, and here's another one of those challenges, is you have to release everything from before. You have to walk away from all your preconceived notions. You have to walk away from your expectations. One of the best things I've gotten from 12-step programs is the concept that expectations are just premeditated resentments. When you put an expectation out there and it doesn't meet your expectation, you're going to be ticked off at it. So, when you dedicate yourself to these things, trust yourself. Trust yourself, trust in your ability, trust in the universe to make everything run smooth. And again, with the urgency, move at a comfortable pace. If there's a big change to be made and you can make it in smaller steps to make them a little bit more digestible, absolutely do it. And the nice thing is, if you're moving at a comfortable pace, and you're making smaller steps, there's no mistakes. It's impossible to make a step on a smaller step because you're only testing the theory. This theory didn't necessarily work out. I'm going to try a different one at an equally slow pace. And one of the most important things about change in general is that small steps and micro corrections result in huge changes. And the best example, if you're looking at a sailing ship, what guides the ship? What is it all? Is it all of the blowing wind taking the sails and pushing it forward? Absolutely. That's where the power is. But the real control is that one little bit of rudder on the very bottom, and a 1, 2, 3 degree change on where it's set over the course of 100 miles will take you thousands of miles away. Micro corrections, small changes every day. Change a morning mantra every now and again. Change your morning routine every now and again. It's a constant source. It's a constant course of improvement by way of smaller adjustments. And you would be amazed at even if there's personal adjustments that you want to make, even relationships, jobs, whatever, a little change every day, 100 days down the line, things are going to be dramatically different, one way or the other. And it's really kind of great. So kind of following in on that is it's very important to have fun with change. That's actually one of the things that excites me more than anything else. One thing I personally love, I love curiosity shops. I love road tripping out to these little backwoods towns, finding these tiny little markets and antique shops, and just seeing the craziest stuff, because it's great. It's entertaining, and change is it's an open world play space. You can do, if you were, most of the change we've talked about is change that's kind of placed upon you. Most of the change we've talked about is change that is kind of unexpected, compulsive, things along those lines. It doesn't have to be, and that's the best part. If you get to a point where you not only acknowledge and affirm change, but you actually go out of your way to make it happen, it's great. It's a wonderful place to take big risks. It's a good place to do stupid things. God, I love doing stupid things. And really, if it's not going to kill you, if it's not going to be fatal, do it. There are no mistakes. It's, cut the wrong wire, push the wrong button, poke the bunny, for heaven's sakes. See what happens. change is science, and it's all testing out the theories. What's going to be entertaining? What's going to be fun? Do I want to do this? Do I want to do it again after I found out exactly what the result of that is? I can safely say there are some things I would not do again. But the key is to be really curious and excited about it. Kids, especially under 10 or 12, the amount of change that they go through on any given day is easily more change than most adults will see in a month or a year. And kids in a good headspace are always going to have that curiosity. They're always going to have that excitement. And when they find something new that they can play with, they're going to own that completely. And, I don't necessarily want to be one of those folks of, embrace your inner child, go back to that youthful discovery kind of idea. A little cliche for me, but it doesn't change the fact that the best part is don't go back to that. Don't go back to that youthful stuff. Accept the fact that you are an adult, and as an adult, you can do whatever the hell you want to. You can have cereal for dinner, and it doesn't even have to be healthy cereal. You can learn to ride a unicycle, assuming that the unicycle is weight bearing enough for a gentleman of my size. You can do all these things, and you should. And stepping out of the day-to-day routines it's a lot tougher for adults than we really want to admit. We're very plugged into the expectations shackle. We want to stay within the acceptable societal guidelines, which they're, absolutely don't do anything to make yourself outcast, but that doesn't mean to not try other things. It's important to do the difficult thing. It's important to step out there and dance with the possibilities. Don't spend so much time investing energy on a need to be right. Would you rather be right, or would you rather be someone that people will go to who is willing to listen to other options? And similarly, if something's a bad idea, you're not locked into following it. You have the option to do what you want to do, and there's no reason to go down with the ship on a bad idea just because you'd put a lot of energy into it. You can walk away and you can make a change. You don't have to follow through on things that are clearly not going to work. Trust your gut. Your intuition wants you to succeed. The universe wants you to succeed. Your intelligence thinks it's smarter and thinks it's in control, but ultimately your brain is also what overthinks. Your brain is what drags you down half the time. Your heart and your gut are very good indicators of what's going to be a better long-term outcome. And it's just nice to have that. So I think this has actually been remarkably thorough, which is great, but there are some things that I just want to kind of throw out as kind of a final affirmation of sorts. It's important to remember that change will not kill you. I realize it's a simple statement, but it is kind of a statement that sometimes we just need to write on the mirror so the fog lights it up when you get out of the shower. Change will not kill you. No matter how much your brain builds up amazing and eclectic worst case scenarios. And as an imaginative creative, I can tell you it's great. More often than not, that's all it is. It's just nightmare scenarios. From a similar perspective, though, our brains can build vast worlds and imagine amazing possibilities. Depending on your perspective, we are either heading toward a post-apocalyptic wasteland or our destiny among the stars, and your brain can imagine either one with equal ability. Change is not only a play space, but really change, for good or worse, is a sacred creative space. The strongest parts of you are absolutely going to survive change. That's pretty much how it works. That's how it goes. And a lot of the rest of the stuff that isn't supposed to be you or isn't the strongest parts of you will go away. It's kind of interesting timing right now, because we've got an excellent example going on the other side of the state with multiple forest fires going on. But when a forest fire comes, the strongest trees are still going to survive. They'll be scarred, they'll be burned, but they'll survive. But for that scarring, everything else then offers much more fertile ground for newer and stronger growth. It's a horrible thing to watch when it's burning, but when you come back the next year and you see the fresh green and you see the bouncing back of the local ecosystem, it really is mind-blowing how powerful even the worst changes can be at what they provide for growth for the future. So from that sacred creative space perspective, it's kind of a place out of time. And when you meditate on the possibilities and potentials and take the time to observe the process and the awareness of it, you can actually master that change. Every day, every minute, every day, a new story is being written. Period. And change will inevitably bring growth, even if it tears everything down first. But if I were going to send you away with one last overall affirmation, change is always intentional. Change is always moving forward. So because it's intentional, you have two options. You can direct it based on your, based on your knowledge and based on your skill and based on the understanding that you are more than ready for it, or you can have it directed for you and ignore everything and panic regularly and lose your mind feeling isolated and alone. There's absolutely no reason not to appreciate the fact that change is always happening. There's absolutely no reason to not embrace the fact that change is always happening. And there's absolutely no reason not to be absolutely excited that change happens, because change, for better or worse, is always a expected, projected, and required part of existence. I really, honestly, I've largely covered the stuff that that I wanted to cover, but I cannot be enthusiastic enough about how important it is to understand how change works so that you bounce back quicker each time. In my own personal experience, I spent 10 years in construction trades, constant change. I spent 20 years in sales, constant change. I spent 10 years in Toastmasters. I've run in parades for 20 years. And with all of this stuff, we have dealt with some of the most difficult things on earth: bankruptcy, death, mental health problems, substance problems, children in the hospital on multiple occasions. All of these things are, I took the time to tell my story to someone the other day, and their face lost all color at the, dude, really? And I will tell you, I would not change a single thing of all of that difficult journey, because if I didn't take that journey, if I didn't have to endure the changes both by choice and by fate, I wouldn't be here right now. And where I am right now is an amazing place. I have got a tremendous network of wonderful people that I love and support, and who love and support me. And a lot of them because of the fact that they've seen the changes and they've borne witness to this. It's one of the most powerful things that once you understand it and once you tap into it, it's just mind blowing. It really honestly is. I'll do just a quick reminder. Change is going to happen. You're never alone. Make a point to acknowledge yourself, acknowledge the fact that it's important that you're going to be able to do this. Relax. Don't let urgency trick you into doing things. Assess your actual foundations, of which you have a much, much larger foundation than you think you do. If you were to sit down and write down the things that you have going for you, you'd be writing for half an hour easily. Look at your assets, look at the tools that you can do, and ask questions about the changes and how much it affects you, what course of action you need to take, if any. And again, don't act if you don't have to. Know when to hold fast, know when to let go, and really have fun with change. You can direct it, it can direct you. One way or another, it's going to happen. You might as well take an active role in it. And I think we actually covered quite a bit in a relatively short time there. What are your thoughts, Miss Jenna Lee?
Wow, thank you so much. That was just the whole process of moving through each piece that you're talking about just brought like so much I think support for this, how people engage with change, and I'm taking away a lot here from even just reflecting on my own, support systems or own questions that I can ask, or actually, and I love too what you were saying about actively pursuing change, mixing it up even in small ways. And I love that the analogy you had with the rudder, you have the ship moving. Yes, the powerful force of change, just being a part of life, is the wind, but even the incremental actions that I take is like the rudder. And it can completely alter where I'm going to be in the next 10, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, right? As those things build where that direction of that ship is going. So that's something that, is huge to be considering.
That's actually one of the really craziest things, because people as a general rule don't really think about time from a perspective of, I am here, I am alive today. I did these things last week. There is a vast span of nobody knows starting the minute I stop talking. And it's going to stretch on until gosh only knows. And we don't necessarily think that. So there's actually a story I'd come up with that I just wasn't able to put down in a blog effectively, and I figure I tend to write some of my own parables. There's a horrendously rocky road over a mountain pass, and people travel it every day, and nobody likes it, and it's miserable. And there's this one guy who. He's following this other person, and this person up ahead of him is picking up a rock and tossing it off to the side. And every day, they follow the same time. Every day, this guy picks up one rock and tosses it to the side. And he's like, well, why are you doing this? And it's like, well, I really only have time to do one a day, but in time, it's one less than I'm going to stumble on next time. And the other guy's like, hey, that's a good idea. It's not a bad idea. So the next day, you've got two people walking this rocky path every day. Each day, each guy takes one off to the side. And over the course of time, this horrible, unpleasant, rocky road becomes a smooth, well-traveled highway, years down the line. You hear stories about these guys. They just decide to plant a tree a day, and all of a sudden, you've got vast forests. And especially in the modern age of so much ease of information, so much ease of change, so much ease of adjustment, it's very hard to have a mindset that goes beyond tomorrow or next month or next year, when really, all you have to do, if you if you pluck one hair on your head every day, you're eventually going to be bald.
True, right? So
Won't
it's
be
really that sense of tapping into the future. It's not
right.
just about, it's now and the future. Like what changes would support you now, but be creating the future you're trying to create.
Well, exactly, and especially, especially from perspective of, from a career perspective, it's a wonderful thing. Every job that I have had has taught me something different. And again, like I mentioned earlier, there's no such thing as starting from a blank slate. Every job has taught me something new. And all of those then translate over to the next job, to the next job, to the next job. And all of a sudden I come into any given position, and this thing that I learned in construction turned into this thing that I could use here, turned into this thing that I could do there. And it's just amazing. And people sell themselves so short as to their skill sets. People don't realize exactly how completely brilliant they are. And it's one of the best things about the whole coaching thing is occasionally people will get a glimpse of themselves the way that other people see them, and that just flash of brilliance. It's a nuclear bomb behind their eyes. It is just that wonderful.
And I really love that too, and I appreciate you especially honing in on to step back from that sense of urgency that is so ingrained in any experience of change. So and even in the sense of even talking about switching jobs and even careers, but I'm also thinking too about those who are maybe starting a new business, right? So like that sense of urgency tends to be there, especially as you're trying to do that. When you're like, okay, the first day, okay, I should have it all set up and everything should be working. I should be successful now. Okay, that didn't happen today. Okay, tomorrow I should have it all set up and everything should be successful. And it's like,
yeah, I beat myself up for about 3 months on a day. Thinking
exactly.
I need to have this done. This should be done. I need to have this set up and this set up before I can do anything. Oh, I don't have set. I need help. Please, somebody help me. Nobody's going to help me. No one knows anything about this. And I can't let anyone know that I suck.
I know, right? Right? And it's just like, it's insane. And I appreciate what you saying, like, well, how crazy is that? And that's okay. Like we all think that we all tend to go there, because it's also built into the way we're taught to go there. And now we have different tools, and now we have this beautiful invitation to step back and approach it in a whole other energy, in a whole other light.
Oh, exactly.
And but one of the last things too that just really like stuck out to me, and something I'm like currently like stepping deeply more into, is that sense of when you said and when you do feel that call to action, go all in. And it's that sense of commitment. And I appreciate that it's not commitment to a particular outcome. I'm not committed to forcing a specific outcome that I can see now without any understanding of all the other factors that might come into play before that happens.
Right.
It's like, no, that's not the commitment I'm talking about, right? Or that I don't think you're encouraging people to.
I'm really glad
it's this commitment to you.
I'm really glad that came through. That was what I had in mind. So I'm glad it came through.
Yeah, right. And so you're committed to you. You're committed to you and like the vision you have that doesn't necessarily have to be completely all, like I have every single picture of everything I want to do. It's just like I know that I'm choosing my success, even if that changes over time. I know that I'm choosing my health, even if what that looks like changes over time. Like that sort of thing.
So it's actually kind of funny. I was talking to someone a couple days ago about expectations, about planning what you want to accomplish and things along those lines. I was an officer for an organization probably some 10 years back, where I had a tremendous amount of influence over everything that was going to be done for the next year. I had a list of things that I wanted to do, big stuff, big changes, big, great, snowball of ideas. And an important thing to keep in mind, especially when you're making those kind of plans, is accept that in the best possible circumstances, you're going to accomplish 20 to 30% of your super big goals. And you will have, and you'll have to decide along the way, what's important, what can I trim, what do I absolutely have to do, what am I just going to accept, what do I have to accept that might not be able to go, and be okay with that acceptance, and be able to not necessarily just trim, but trim with intention, and trim with understanding that this was something that wasn't, it wasn't fated. So
Yeah, and I appreciate that, because in a way that I look at it too is like, the reason why you might only see maybe 20, 30% of an expectation is that you don't see all the other things that
exactly.
is greater than that. And so, right. So like, not just, oh, okay, I have to just accept that I might feel disappointed every time because I have these big expectations. That's not necessarily
Correct.
like what you're saying, or how I would approach it too. It's like this sense of, I might like, well, first, if I try to go without an expectation, then I can just enjoy like this beautiful thing that's being created. But even if I do have an expectation, like, even if it's only 20% of that, if I'm still asking like, what else is here? Like, what are the other possibilities? Because like every time you go to it, each new day, each new month, there's going to be new things that are available that wasn't before when you set up that expectation. So
Exactly.
like, what could it be? Yeah.
Well, exactly, and that's a lot of it. It's not just a question of it's not just a question of not meeting your goals. It's a question of the goals are going to change over time. Yeah, as with anything, observe, assess, and integrate. Observe, assess, and integrate. You're not going to. A lot of the things that I had in mind, for example, at that time, were just kind of silly fluff stuff that kind of sounded worthwhile. And in truth, I ended up doing so many more different things that had a much broader base. So it was pretty wild, actually.
That's awesome. Well, cool. Thank you so much for all this.
Amazing. And
Like,
I am so excited to take part in yours next week. A
oh,
lot of
thank you.
the things that you're talking about are things that I kind of honestly need a bit.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to taking part, and this has just been an amazing experience. I'm so remarkably grateful for this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Oh, you bet. And I will continue to do so whenever you ask, my friend. So
All right.
yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and stop.